guidelines for city CIP projects. We additionally communicated to all city agencies just last month the requirement for the use of these design guidelines, and just last week delivered first trainings to about half of our Department of Design and Construction project managers, who will then be using these for new projects starting in the development of the city's fiscal year 26 project list. And then lastly, on the Climate Champions program, these are really about elevating and investing in place-based community organizations, but also the people that they serve, and identifying individuals and local leaders. We just next week are wrapping up this summer cohort with the third round of workshops. And we're super excited about a final summary wrap-up huike on Friday, September the 13th at the Bishop Museum after hours. So all are invited, 5 to 9 p.m. And we'll make sure to put out more information as that gets closer. So with that, that concludes my report, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Director Gonzer, what an excellent update. Thank you so much. I just want to say you will be missed. I think we all in the commission, and everyone will give their own remarks, have enjoyed working with you, and have enjoyed all the work that you've done with the office to sort of just elevate the city's attention on climate change and how they sort of adapt to our changing environment. So I just want to personally say thank you and wish you all the best in your next chapter in Los Angeles. But to the updates that you shared, two that really kind of piqued my interest. I'm glad to hear that we are 5 weeks out to our benchmark reporting for buildings over 50,000 square feet. Yeah. I do like the idea that we have whole building data. I think when you are done with that for the first reporting cycle, it'd be great to sort of get an update on that information, if you're able to sort of share that. I'm curious to see what else you're collecting besides water and energy from that whole data kind of reporting.
Yeah, so I mean, currently already on the benchmarking website, there's the data transparency map. So you can see profiles of information of buildings that reported last year, have already submitted this year. But for those that accepted and wanted to work within the extension, we don't have that information yet.
Okay. I guess I'm also curious, adding on that, will there be sort of like a lessons learned or tips for future applicants?
Certainly, we always work to improve the information on how to report, but certainly now in this second year of reporting, we will then, at least for those that have done 2 years is not a trend, but certainly it allows you to look at 1 year versus another. And that's the whole point. So it's really in terms of next steps and learning from the information, either us at the city, but also the buildings and the operators and maintainers themselves.
Okay, great. And the last thing I just wanted to ask, and I know you talked about it at the last meeting, it's about your climate change design guidelines for public CIP projects. I'm glad you did your first trainings. Is this resource publicly available?
Not currently at this point, but
okay.
I think we could consider that moving forward. And really what it is, it's sort of a 3-step, very easy Excel-based resource that guides you through looking at maps data and understanding climate risks and exposure. It talks about the different kinds of strategies, and then it walks you through potential solutions to address those risks and produces a report. It does not negate designer expertise and human decision making, right? It's all about making sure that we're informed and equipped with all the information that also gets balanced across, priority investments. What are the resources available to do the investments, and then any community council or administration priorities as well.
Okay. I think, as a professional designer myself, it might be useful to just see what this resource is, particularly those that work in partnership with the public sector. Great. Well,
We
again,
would
thank
envision
you.
it. So following the lead of other cities, I mean, you can see New York City's on version 4.
Yeah.
You can see the sort of exec order that describes who, how, what, who, all the question words in terms of the application and implementation of those. We're just not there yet.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, if there is anything that the commission can also do to help maybe provide additional guidance to that or expansion, I think please have your office let us know. But that kind of concludes my comments. I want to just again reiterate, thank you again for your service and wishing you all the best of luck. I want to move on to our commissioners now. Vice Chair Osuka, any comments?
Yeah, Matt, I just also want to thank you so much again for your service. I know often being a government worker is a thankless job, and sometimes it's easy to focus on sort of the negative things. But I want to thank you for all of your time and dedication to the CCSR office, but also to the commission. So thank you, Matt. Oh, that's
Great.
all for me, Melanie. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Romine?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to echo those thanks to Matt for all your service to our communities, to the city, and our time working together goes back beyond that to working with Sea Grant. It's been a real pleasure. You'll be missed for sure. So thanks for everything, and best of luck in your move and transition. I in particular want to congratulate the city on completing the long-term disaster recovery plan. It would be great to get a report out on that if somebody from the city is willing. Is that Sarah that was the lead on that?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for all your work on that, Sarah, and the whole team. I think it would be good to have some discussion with that as well, as to where the commission can further assist in next steps around climate-related disaster preparedness. Let's call it. So yeah, just a request maybe for one of our meetings to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Still remember being at your PhD defense. Long time ago.
Long time ago.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Romine. That's an excellent suggestion. We'll add it to the list. Commissioner Aligato?
Thank you. Yeah, I also want to add all of my gratitude to the roles that you have been playing for the city and for this commission. I think you stepped in as you started as, I think that we had like the assistant director, then you became the head cheese. And I think I wanted to say that you really brought calm balance to the role, and really helped us to transition as we became like a very brand new commission. And I think we've now become much more established. And so I think I just wanted to recognize that you played a huge role in helping our commission and the office really become a functional and important and integral part of the city's action and how it functions. As you know, we are an advisory board, but I think that we have been very effective, in my opinion, at providing information that's timely and necessary and future looking. So I really want to thank you and recognize you, Matt, for the work that you've done in creating and building the team that really supports this commission. And also, similar to Brad, I also remember you from when you were with us in Hawaii Sea Grant and lamented that you left us, but I'm really glad that I had the chance to work with you again and wish only the best for you and your family. I also want to echo, as far as the updates, that we definitely should, when it is appropriate, glean those really important like updates that and activities that the climate change OCCSR produces, and invite them to come and share out in our commission meetings. So not only the suggestion that Brad spoke of, but I also want to say that when the large over 50,000 square feet buildings dashboard and report comes out, I think it would be a great idea to also invite them to present on that, and perhaps also invite folks to respond, other stakeholders for whom that could be a really important piece of information for them to be able to comment on. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. And I think current chair and current vice chair also are starting to understand the legacy that you've left as chair of the commission, and just sort of the structure and file management and all the cheat sheets and operating procedures. So thank you for helping to establish all that work as well.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Allegado. Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's going to be nice to have a partner in LA. I hope that you can bring some of the island spirit to a much larger city, and that we'll continue to glean knowledge from you. You could come back and help us with any insights that you learn from trying to manage a city of that size. I'm sad I won't be able to work with you in the coming years as a commissioner, but I think your choices are wise, and I hope that it's a great transition for you. Yeah, and thank you very much for ushering me onto this commission, and obviously all of the work that you've done.
Thanks, Dr. Olson. Certainly also appreciate all the early day work of General Progress Indicator, Aloha Plus, all the working with your students up at NREM when I was at the university and even at the city. So all the partnerships, certainly we don't need to go one by one for any more of this stuff, Chair. Thanks.
We just want to know that you're loved, Matt. So thank you, everyone. Okay, any comments from the public? Okay, I see none. I also want to share that we are now Facebook Live. So Haley, is there anything on Facebook Live for this particular agenda item?
No, there's not.
Great, thanks, Haley. Okay, so we're going to move on to agenda item number 6. It is a presentation on the City and County of Honolulu Transportation Emissions Reduction Plan by Deputy Director Ben Sullivan and by Chris Clark of the Department of Transportation and Services. I'd like to welcome Deputy Director Sullivan and Chris Clark. Hi.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm excited to give a presentation today with Chris Clark on this. I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going. Can everyone see the screen that we have shared?
Yes,
okay.
I can see that.
Yes.
So this is a project that has been long in development. It was initiated by DTS years and years ago and was brought forward by funding that was provided by Oahu MPO and a local match, importantly, by Ulupono Initiative. So we're thankful to all the parties that enabled this to happen. This is the Energy and Emissions Reduction Plan for Transportation. So I'm going to jump right in. Chris and I are going to kind of tag team this a little bit, and then we'll have a few moments for questions after we complete. So diving in, our agenda here is really kind of give an overview of what this work was about and discuss some of the findings, and then really give some Q&A for you all. So very straightforward. I'm going to, again, there's quite a few slides, so I'll move forward. This is some background, the citation in terms of the requirement for this plan. So the Department of Transportation Services shall prepare an energy conservation and emissions reduction plan for city transportation systems, which shall include methods to meet state greenhouse gas reduction and clean energy goals. So that provides the important foundation. And this right here is a summary of the tasks that were undertaken for this work. So you see, it's quite a diverse array of things. I don't know, Chris Clark, if you want to give any additional comments as to kind of how this evolved, perhaps just to give the commissioners an idea of what the history of this plan was in terms of evolution. But before I do that, I'll note that Chris and Nicola Hedge and others have been involved in this for several years under the development, and I only took it over in the last year to help complete it under with ICF as our consultant. So Chris, any initial comments before we keep going?
Yeah, just like you mentioned, this is a charter requirement. So it's a new plan. So it's the first one we ever did. And, at the time we developed the scope, these were items that we were aware of that we thought would fit in this type of plan, just based on the kind of direction that was included in that charter language. So pretty broad, and certainly other things could be here as well as we know more. But I think it's a great start. So that's kind of how we got to where it is. But this is a charter requirement DTS plan, but we are grateful to Ben and his team at their office to be able to support and program manage and help us, because some of the elements aren't strictly DTS, so really important to get a full city and other agencies involved.
Thank you, Chris. So one of the very first tasks is shown here. So really looking at transportation emissions reduction targets, trends, and mitigation strategies. This work was completed by former Commissioner Kaufman, actually, and others, and really provides a good baseline for where we are today with regards to transportation emissions reductions. I'm not going to read everything here on the slide, but just noting that this provided a good look at how we're doing on CAP implementation, some commentary and discussion on challenges to that implementation, which are very real, but we're all working very hard to move those things forward. And then some recommendations finally. So on the right, you see a graph that is showing our target emissions reduction. So that green line on the bottom is that very steep decline in emissions that we aspire to achieve by 2045. And you can see some of the other wedges in this that really, outline the challenge. It's not going to be an easy thing, and we have a lot more unknowns in terms of how we're going to achieve our emissions reductions than knowns. I will note that just really quickly that 30% gray line that you can see that represents a 30% VMT reduction is in itself incredibly aggressive, and DTS has a lot of wonderful programs that are really important to that. But the work by Dr. Kaufman actually shows that even in achieving that very aggressive and ambitious plan, we still have a need for a lot more to be able to hit our targets. And this is something that actually Dr. Kaufman put together in the genesis of this plan. And so I'm just including this here to outline what it really means. These are other cities and jurisdictions that have really strong VMT reduction goals and have achieved a higher level of VMT reduction than Honolulu to date. And this, what you're looking at is Multnomah County, San Francisco County, and then a combination of the two is what really would be required to get to 30%. Again, I'll ask Chris if he has any additional comments on this, but I suspect it's really just emphasizing the ambition.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually have this posted in our common area at our offices to kind of reinforce to staff what we have to achieve to meet this goal. I think what's important is if you look at the mode shares, transit, bike, and walk. So the first column there, city is at 9% for transit, 1% for bike, 10% for walk. But what we have to achieve to meet what's in the target in the slide before is on the far right. So our transit ridership would need to go from 9 to 29%. So we need to triple. Bike use would need to quadruple. Walking would need to more than double. So these are not small changes in behavior and are going to take significant investment in order to achieve. So it's nice having policy, but if we really want to do this, we need to make investments, and that kind of feeds into some of the rest of what Ben has queued up next.
Thanks, Chris. So, while looking at the difficulty of that, we also wanted to reflect on, the really powerful agreement that was achieved as a result of the recent settlement. So with HDOT really focused on creating a transportation emissions plan that gets us to zero by 2045, we hope and expect that this will be a significant shift in terms of the available funding. Those details have not been fully fleshed out yet, but it's a very exciting moment to see what has happened and what is going to go happen going forward when you look at the agreement that was published as a result of the settlement. So really creating a reduction plan, including ground, marine, and air transportation, and really, again, back to VMT, including interim VMT multimodal expansion and Vision Zero goals, as well as electrification. And we'll talk about a little bit more about some of those things as we move forward. So maybe the last thing to highlight is really this third item on the bottom of the page: revised transportation programming and budgeting process. So back to what Chris was saying about really needing to resource this effort. We're hopeful that this can be part of the solution, but that's all to be determined. So this was another task within the work underway under this program. And really what this did is it looked at different facility types and their real life cycle emissions, so that we have a way within the city to start using decision-making tools like this to help inform some of our capital investments. And we're at the really early stages of this, but this provides like a preliminary foundation for us to start to understand this in regards to our capital investments. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it's something that could be in the future incorporated more robustly into the climate change design guidelines and other opportunities. And it really does help us look at these projects in a different way. So understanding both the embodied emissions associated with the materials and whatnot, but also the emissions implicated by the usages of the various facilities. I've covered, Chris, any additional comments on this, or should we just keep rolling?
No, I think that's a good summary.
Okay.
I think the next slide's mine too.
Yes, sir.
So just wanted to, this is sort of put your money where your mouth is component of the project. So obviously the city has a large base of employees, and we want to make sure we can, make some investments related to supporting them to make some behavioral change decisions in how they make their commute. And so what we did is outline some elements that would be, both the logic for it and some elements that would be really critical to help us to make some of that transition just with our own workforce. And so we have funded beyond this plan, we've actually gone into implementation. So we just executed a contract this last week with a local company, Ulu High Tech, that's going to provide some of the support for our TDM implementation. And so we have funded $1 million a year for 5 years to include not only just our internal city, but other TDM implementation that would be public facing and would also subsidize van pools and other elements that we know work. And so one of the pieces of that is we want to make sure to support the city employees. We have piloted for several months now a monthly transit pass that is loaded on city employees' badge. And so if they opt out of getting subsidized parking, so if you see under the equity component, historically, obviously city and state employees, many employers provide parking. And that's really, that costs the city a lot of money. And so what we've done is for an employee that opts out of that parking, that we were providing them with a monthly transit pass. And so they don't have to pay for the monthly transit pass as an option for them. And so the goal is to roll that out to the entire city. And then there are other components to this as we remodel our parking structure. We want to add technology there so we can better control and perhaps offer daily parking or other kind of parking products for employees so they can make more real-time decisions instead of having to decide on a month-to-month basis. And then making sure they're aware of bike options, bike share, van pool, all of the rest of other single occupancy vehicle type trips that they would make. And so we want to do this as soon as a new employee starts, make sure in that new employee orientation that we make sure they're aware of these options and that we can financially incentivize them to make choices that are better aligned with this plan. Next slide, please. And so this is just a little more to explain why that's a good idea. The return on investment is great. Obviously, providing a parking space is extremely expensive. And the city only pays, the employee only pays a fraction of that. Right now, it's set at around $80, but it's costing the city $200 or more for the parking spot. So the city is having to subsidize that. And so if we can shift some of these commute choices by our employees, that helps to save funding. It also helps to make sure people stay, that they're provided with different ways to get to work. Their transportation cost is a big burden on everyone. And so if we can reduce their transportation costs, it helps them to want to stay an employee with the city. And then we also, the program I talked about earlier, It's also 80% federally funded, so the city doesn't have to take on that full cost themselves. And so we're using FHWA dollars. If we get, and for instance, if we get van pools that are operating, we can report that to FDA and get money back through formula. So the more that we can kind of shift this, that helps to make the city's bottom line positive. Another element of this that we did with this plan as a test, and so this is one of many plans the city's working on, but we wanted to include here just kind of a test location. Obviously, we've started to install transit priority lanes. For many years, we had Hotel Street, but we constructed King recently, and then Kuhio has been awarded. We expect to go to construction this year. But we're looking at other opportunities, not just for transit priority lanes, but for signal improvements and other ways that the bus can talk to the signal to speed up traffic. When we propose those ideas, generally we get tons of resistance from the traditional like traffic engineering community, significant opposition to making those kind of improvements. So we wanted to spend a little bit of effort here to show why it works. So we picked a local corridor, Nimitz Highway, one we have a lot of transit service on, and what would happen to regular single occupancy vehicle travel. Would it completely be gridlock if we were to take some of that right away and some of the priority in the signal and give that to the bus? So we did that work in this plan, and we wanted to use that as a tool before we have a project to be able to go out and communicate with the transportation engineers and make sure that they were aware of kind of the impacts of that. And BRT and transit priority is really important so that we're building that trunk of the Skyline rail system. But we really got to make other investments so that we can get people to the stations. And so this plan helps cue up why that's a good idea and communicate that. And we're continuing to work to identify these corridors and bring to the public other corridors that we think are important for providing the bus with some priority. So that was a piece of this work. Another key element is our parking pricing. So the city owns about 4,000 on-street parking, single space parking meters. We have about 4,000 off-street, and then there's another 100,000 free parking spaces that are throughout the island that are on city streets. And the low cost of parking compared to what it is at privately offered space really impacts the demand for those spaces. So the city's subsidizing that space now. In a private sector, parking on a lot is probably double or triple what the city rates are. And so we wanted to test what would happen to greenhouse gas emissions, VMT, vehicle miles traveled, if we were to increase the price of our city inventory of parking. And so we did that. We tested some scenarios. And on our website, we've published a component of this report that identifies what we think those rates should be. And we're working with the administration now to hopefully in January introduce a bill to increase the parking rates to help us to move the needle on some of these decision making. And then the other element that's really kind of strictly in DTS wheelhouse is for our public transportation fleet. So the city's contractor, Oahu Transit Services, operates our bus system, but the city owns the buses and directs OTS where to perform, to offer bus service. And so we are making investment. We have fully electric buses that are operating now and are functioning very well. So we're testing those, but really we're dependent on both HECO and the availability of electric chargers to buy more buses. we have funding for another 80 buses that's available to us now. And we're working really hard to install additional chargers throughout our both en route chargers and at our bus depots. And so we wanted to include that as a component of this plan to make sure we could talk through that plan, the realistic pace of how we could be able to accomplish that, and then the benefits of it as well. It will cost more money to buy electric buses to install the charging infrastructure, but it's important and aligned with our goal.
So that brings us to the rest of the fleet. And before I go into that, I just want to thank Chris and his team because they are true leaders in this space. And, you know, whether it's the bus or transportation demand management, you know, they let us in to help where we can, but they are just championing these really, really critical aspects of our climate action plan. And it's phenomenal to see it and to see the amount of progress they're making, even though we know we have such a long way to go. This next slide is really about how the rest of the fleet transitions. And again, not reading the whole thing, but this just shows a process about what this looks like and what we did during this process to learn more about how we're going to achieve electrification across the city fleet. And for context, I want to just let commissioners and the public know, you know, DTS represents the largest fuel consumption within the city by far. So they're over 5 million gallons a year. And that, you know, really the next largest user is Honolulu Police Department. So HPD is about 1.3 billion gallons per year. And then you go down from there to the Department of Services, just over 1 million. And then it drops precipitously from there. So there's a couple other departments that even show up on the graph with those big numbers in those agencies I just named, including DFM and Parks, but those are both like in the 200,000 gallon range. And then everything else is almost invisible. And so really we understand the priorities, and DTS's leadership represents focusing on the biggest rock in the jar, if you will. And really, you know, again, their work is phenomenal. We're lucky to listen in to some of those really difficult and challenging engineering conversations that they have about siting the chargers and working with TECO and working through the process. And it's amazing how much complexity to navigate to achieve all that in many ways. But for this task, we did have some really good success with what we call department level prioritization strategies for electrification. And so what that was it was really getting into and treating the departments individually and looking at their unique criteria and needs and discussing what the early priorities might be for electrification, because it's not an easy process for any of them, but the challenges are different within each agency. And so those plans were a really great opportunity to kind of help the other departments following DTS's lead to figure out where do they start. And it's really, you know, really that simple. There's a lot of work with the grid that's referenced here, and then there's, you know, a lot of phasing and planning, and we have done some work internally to set processes up to ensure that we're electrifying as efficiently as possible, and we're going at a pace that really matches the market as opposed to trying to jump out way ahead because of the level of expense. And this slide is really just here to emphasize a point, which is, again, you know, looking at the things that are the largest fuel consumers. So this slide shows you various sites within the Department of Environmental Services. This was part of one of those fleet prioritization strategy conversations. And so for their 1 million gallons of fuel, this represents, you know, the largest site and the largest users. And what jumps out right away as refuse is their big, you know, by far their largest user. So 85% of all the fuel in E&B is refuse. And so they're looking right now to figure out a way to pilot some refuse trucks. Obviously, a lot of other things going on there, but they're excited to do that. And we hope that'll happen in the next few years. So another component of this was to look at our public EV infrastructure action plan. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but what we did is we asked ICF to really focus in on several priorities. One is thinking about who needs access to home, access to charging at home. And that is to say, a lot of residents who live in multifamily, you know, don't have the opportunity to charge in their garages, and you got to think about that. We cite public charging. And then you see the other priorities discussed here: convenience and accessibility in higher density areas where there's really a lot of demand is another aspect of how we cite chargers. And then talking about deployment, really we recognize the need to get better with utilization of federal funding. And again, this is an area where DTS is really a leader, and other departments how to manage and deal with FHWA funding to do efficient projects. So there was a public engagement and interagency coordination component of this. There were some surveys done. There was a lot of interdepartmental work, and there was, each task was really discreetly handled in terms of what the engagement components were. And one of the things I'm really excited about is re-engaging on a broader level with community when we actually get into our climate action plan update. So I'm actually just going to zip to that. We've been going for a while, but last thing here, we're almost to the end. We wanted to show you a look at the number of actions complete within the existing climate action plan and what some of those ongoing actions are. So, I think it's important to note that there's a lot of work going into the bike and pedestrian plans that DTS has. And then Chris mentioned the use of dedicated bus lanes and the Kuhio lane coming up. He certainly talked about TDM as an ongoing project as well, an important one, as well as the elimination of parking minimums, which obviously has been something, with Bill 2 that we began and is continuing forward with other parking initiatives. So I'm not going to, again, I'm feeling like we need to wrap this up given all your other agenda items, but I want to just perhaps end with, before we open up for questions, to talk about the fact that CCSR is currently positioned and nearly complete with the contracting to update our climate action plan. So we will be embarking on the 2025 to 2030 climate action plan in the next several months. We have a contractor almost selected, so no announcements yet, but very, very soon we'll have a signed contract and we can talk about who that is doing the work. And as Director Gonzer indicated, one of the things that we are most excited about is this notice of funding availability to work with community-based organizations and really fund them and let them lead some of the frontline community engagement, which we expect to be a really critical component of this. And it's a great opportunity because of the generous funding from EPA, whereas in the past, we haven't always had the ability to offer up funding to outside partners. So can't say enough about how excited the team is about this. And really just another shout out to the CCSR team. Our climate action planners and our energy team is really, really working hard to make this the first time we do this really a transformative way to look at our planning processes and to lead and to really give community the reins in terms of how we can do better with the things that we're doing across the city. So that is the end of our presentation, and we'll certainly welcome any questions. Chair Islam.
Thank you, Deputy Director Sullivan and Chris Clark, for your excellent presentation. It's very informative. I'd like to reserve my comments to the end and ask Vice Chair Otsuka to start with any comments.
Sure. Hi, Ben and Chris. I just want to thank you for all of your hard work on this project. I really see this as like 8 separate planning efforts, and the fact that you folks were sort of cohesively trying to tie each and every one together with regard to looking at our emissions overall and seeing this as a multi-pronged sort of effort and lots of strategies, I think is really, really great. Chris, I just wanted to say that I'm so glad you emphasized the need for more investment. I know we have a lot of plans, but let's make plans into action. And I'm a big believer in our values. Our budgets are a reflection of our values. So if we continue to invest in more roadways and things that help make it easier for people to drive alone more often, that's really not helping our climate cause. I wanted to know, Chris, in the capital improvement budgeting process tool, or more broadly in your efforts, whether you're looking at sort of rejiggering how we see projects as successful. So I'm thinking specifically about moving away from level of service. So how does a project impact car traffic and moving more towards people throughput? So how do we move as many people as efficiently as possible with our limited roadway space? So that's my first question.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't see your question in the chat earlier, but to answer the question you just asked, I feel like we were kind of ahead of the curve here slightly. We probably 3 years ago released a traffic impact assessment guideline, and any TIA that is reviewed by DTS, our comments are exactly in line with what you just said. We're encouraging so we review basically TIAs that come with any kind of new development. If there's any permitting processes required there that we need to review, and we provide guidance to those who are preparing those kind of reports, that they look at all modes so that they evaluate their mode share for their proposed development. We want to make sure that the number of parking stalls they're providing with the development balances with what they're saying in their mode share. Often they want to provide way too much parking. And then in their traffic study, we look at the impacts to all modes. So we have them calculate, like for instance, level of stress on bicycles, comfort for pedestrians. And so they look at what mitigation they would need to make so that they can have those other modes elements of the project included. If they construct it or they pay us to construct it or it's otherwise made so they can support their development. And there's a learning curve associated with that, but we're working hard to kind of work with the community and move in that direction so that we can on the front end measure the things that really matter to us. And then regarding your question that's in the chat, we do also provide, for city employees at least, we do provide business purpose holo cards to each division and department. So it's not for every employee, but even for the employees that drive to work, if they need to go on a trip by bus, we provide them with at least 2 cards that they can go to their division secretary and get access to. If they need more than that, they're using them more frequently, we can provide additional ones, but we already want to make sure that they can easily take the bus for a business purpose trip today. And this has been one of, some of my, it really puts a smile on my face. Often I've seen, been on the bus with our director and deputy going to a meeting, or with Ben, other people, where when we're actively using the bus on a business purpose to go to a meeting, I think it's fantastic. And both the operators, they see the director, they know the director's going on the trip, and we see other customers there as well. So we're trying to do that. We're trying to live that ourselves.
And I have one more question, but I can wait for the other commissioners to go first if you prefer that. Up to you. I don't want to eat up too much time.
Yeah, I think, sure, we'll circle back with you. Yana, thank you. Commissioner Romine, any questions?
Well, just want to thank Chris and Ben and the rest of the team for all your hard work and report out on this. Great work. The numbers about bicycle, maybe that was more broadly multimodal use, really stood out to me. I think that was 1% of all rider share. I mean, well, that's kind of a depressing number. I guess maybe the hope there is that it's a lot easier to double, triple, quadruple 1% than it is, say, 10%. So I hope the city will keep concentrating on that. I do see new bike lanes going in. I'd be interested to know if there's some survey work on public perception of those bike lanes. I mean, my feeling, and I think I hear this from others, is that some of those lanes still don't feel really safe, really protected really well for riders. So I hope that's something the city can continue to concentrate on. Among all the great work you did, I didn't see any mention of the rental car industry and rental cars. Just want to confirm that was not part of the scope of this study. Is that correct? Chris or Ben?
That's correct. Other than the kind of being encompassed within public infrastructure for electric vehicles.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it just emphasizes the opportunity for us to talk about that in our ongoing work on the climate change and tourism guidance document that we're working on. I think that's an important gap. Reading that, I understand there's not been a lot of work on inventorying the greenhouse gas mitigation or greenhouse gas emissions of the rental car industry, and it's certainly a big contribution to our traffic. So just want to highlight that for the commission's ongoing work. So again, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Great work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Aligato.
Yeah, this is really fascinating work. I was really kind of interested in the figure that you showed about the refuse and the use of fuel there. And kind of, I was just wondering about, just is there a thought that there would be investment in the future in more lower emissions kind of vehicles, or is it possible that the fleet could move to I'm just not familiar with the tech space, so I was Googling electric
Sure,
vehicle garbage
sure.
trucks basically, and I just was wondering if that is like what, is that the direction folks are going into, or is it kind of shifting just the usage, like the amount of miles or anything that would
Sure,
need.
sure. Great question, Commissioner. We appreciate it. So, the Department of Environmental Services is looking at a couple options. They're looking at electric refuse trucks, but they're also looking at biogas. So, gas, that they get either from anaerobic digestion at their wastewater facilities or through recovery of gas at a landfill. They are currently in the midst of evaluating that. I think my understanding is their intention is to, in the interim, to purchase several refuse trucks, but that's kind of TBD in the works right now. I think what's notable is that currently, the cost of an electric refuse truck is double to triple the cost of a conventional vehicle. And so that presents a barrier. Another barrier right now is, you may know that there's actually a nationwide shortage of refuse trucks. So they have their hands full just picking up the trash every day. So they're a little bit cautious about getting too deep into a pilot that's going to take away from the primary objectives. But yeah, they are looking at both of those options. There's certainly vehicles available. The funding isn't as robust as it is through FHWA or FTA. I think it's probably, Chris can correct me if I'm stating it wrong, but certainly the federal government is putting a lot of money into investment in transit buses, but not the same into refuse yet at this point. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great question, Commissioner Aligato. I thought similar when I saw that number. Commissioner Olson, any questions, comments?
Sure. Yeah, this was fascinating. Thank you so much. And so much work. I had just two things to add. One on the transportation demand management framework. This links to the previous comment about why people drive, right? And as a mom of young children, it's really hard to get kids to and from school without taking them in a car. So in addition to doing errands and some solutions for, day-to-day errands, are you connecting with the school's Department of Education? We know that the cost of commuting is really high in terms of opportunity costs. People sitting in their cars has public health issues. So one thought was to reduce the car traffic that's required to get children to school. We all know, we see it in the summers that all of a sudden you have clear roadways, right? Yeah, so that was my first question. And then I have a second one, but
Yeah, I can take that one, Ben, if you like. So for decades, yeah, in transportation, we've been doing safe routes to school. And so the city has a safe routes to school program. And again, it's funding is part of it. So safe routes to school programs have historically, there's different elements to it: engineering, education, enforcement. And so the program has certainly gone out to schools, tried to produce plans around schools that are really ripe for increasing the number of trips that are made by other modes. And so there's both state funds and federal funds to help support that. The other good news for us is we approved a pedestrian master plan not too long ago. And so we've always kind of had the encouragement side of it there. But really, there hasn't been any investment in Honolulu in sidewalks in 40 or 50 years. And so the first sort of dollar investments in those we're seeing those now. We have a plan, and we've been applying for Safe Streets for All funding, and we've gotten some both discretionary funding, formula funding. So we have our first couple millions are starting to trickle in, and now the engineering work can start. And really the focus of that plan was around schools. As a parent myself, making all effort to try and get my kids to school. by bike or walking. Thankfully, they did go to schools at certain points in their career where they're able to do that, or later able to ride the public city bus to get to school. And so, certainly, like anything, it does take money, it does take investment, but that's a great opportunity for us to help move that needle on the VMT change.
Commissioner Olson, did you have a second question that you wanted to ask, or?
So, yeah, I wanted to point out on just the fleet transition plan, the linkage between going EV and the generation modality of HECO. So if we're still generating the electricity that's going into buses from dirty fuels, we're not getting the carbon benefit, right? So the mitigation potential really depends on pushing the renewable energy portfolio forward as well.
Thanks, Commissioner Olson. We certainly keep our eyes on that. And I think one of the interesting facts in this case is that there's significantly less emissions associated with these electric buses as the grid is now than there is with diesel. But we look forward to improving that further as HECO moves forward.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Olson. I just want to echo great comments from my fellow commissioners. Just sort of thinking broadly, when I looked at this, particularly, I understand it requires more capital to increase our infrastructure and kind of achieve all of these goals. I'm wondering, in sort of this planning and just in the discovery of all of this, has there been any broader thinking about how we can redesign some of our communities and our districts to accommodate these needs? And I go particularly to sort of electric buses and potentially the additional role that they could play in resiliency for communities, particularly at like a school or district level. I personally am not so familiar with where the city depots are for charging the electric buses, but I wonder if the city starts to think about expansion of the electric bus fleet, if there could be discussion of integrating some of those resources more within communities so the network is smaller, and then those batteries that are in the electric bus then begin to become sort of a backup energy source for that sort of broader community. Obviously that speaks to larger infrastructure improvements, but that's sort of the way my mind thinks about how all of this can be kind of connected. So maybe it's more of a comment than anything, but I'm just really curious. Like, I know this is the first of the plan, but how do we sort of see this sort of folding out into sort of larger kind of broader community improvements?
Well, I can talk about the bus side of that. We do have a fleet plan that we update at least annually. And so that's sort of new. So there's a lot of action happening in real time with buying of buses and installing the chargers. So it's something we gotta, we kind of had one simple slide here, but it's like 100-page plan that we're regularly kind of tweaking the numbers on. Our primary depots are Pearl City and at Middle Street. And that's, that's where the maintenance is, that's where the bus wash is, that's where everybody bus goes home, sleep at night kind of thing. But in addition to that, we want to make sure that, we talk about deadhead frequently when we talk about transportation or bus planning. And so we don't want to run buses back just to charge. And so working with Kiana and others, we've been trying to make improvements through a concept called mobility hubs. And so we have one that we're funded to go to construction on this year. Pearl Ridge is kind of a first example. So we'll be right at the rail station. There'll be bus shelters there for people to wait comfortably while the routes connect. And then there's also 3 chargers for bus that will be installed there so that bus can charge on route. And we have probably another 7 or 8 other locations. Currently, the NPO is studying one in Haleiwa and the other Kapahulu and Waikiki. But we have a lot of other en route kind of locations where we really would like to provide chargers, so the bus can charge that without having to go back to the depot. And you do make a good point about, resiliency. Can those hubs serve other purposes? Do we, make sure that they're a node, not just for bus, but for rail and bike and walking and other kind of elements that would make it more comfortable. Even you mentioned earlier, rental car charging, Haleiwa would be a good opportunity to provide some rental car charging as a destination. So that's sort of how we're approaching it. And, it as every time we make a decision, we make an improvement, we update our plan, and try to make better choices over time to get it aligned.
Yeah, really quickly, I'll just add one thing, which is that one of the challenges we do not have answers for yet is really backup power as we electrify our fleets, because a lot of these vehicles have to roll in disasters and potentially when the grid is down. And so there's a lot of concern about that. We're early enough that it's not really a pressure point yet, but we are all very much looking at it. We're hoping to get help from the state in the next few years, and analyzing that. And then I think for Chris's comments, there's some other projects in the hop.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben and Chris, for sharing that info. Vice Chair Otsuka, I think you had one more comment or question for the group.
Yeah. So Chris, am I correct in saying that the city doesn't have a VMT goal or a policy in place at the city level for VMT reduction?
Well, we tried to, you saw from Ben's earlier slide, there was a chart that showed what we would need to achieve to get to the 2045 goal. So just kind of illustrating what it would take. I don't know, Ben, if you want to add, I'm not sure if there is yeah.
Happy to go to that slide, but I think maybe, looking at what just happened with the settlement, and that slide talked about setting VMT goals at the state level, and hopefully that will inform a lot of the work we do city level as well. But to my knowledge, I would actually have to defer to Chris as to whether what operationally how they look at VMT goals.
Yes, we don't have a island-wide VMT goal that I'm aware of.
The reason I'm asking, and Melanie, I promise this is the last thing. The reason I'm asking is I'm trying to figure out like how the commission can support your office, Chris, and as well as Ben at your office in achieving this huge need for a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions related to the ground transportation sector. So it's something I was thinking about was like if it would be helpful for us to write a memo or a reso to city council, sort of urging you folks or urging city council or the mayor to adopt a VMT reduction goal. I'm not sure if you have suggestions, Chris, but I'm trying to understand how we can support our budgeting and investments to go to support more electrification of our bus fleet, more bus service, more investment in bike ped infrastructure, et cetera. So do you have any thoughts, Chris, on how we can support you?
Yeah, we were, policy's important, and we were really excited to see this case settled. And for us, what that means is there's often a lot of people that want to, that support a policy, but when it comes down to a specific project, a specific location, generally all we hear from is the, not in my backyard kind of residents that, wouldn't use it necessarily. And when we go out on the street, we talk to people, we can interview. We don't find that those people represent the general public who might use a facility. And so for us, we really need both those who were involved in the lawsuit, this commission, everybody. We need you at the project level. Policy is one thing, but we really need at the project level. That's where this dies.
Okay. We have Melanie, we have an agenda item, and I think that we're going to discuss in terms of what actions we can take as a commission. So that's really good information to know, Chris. Like, how can we support at the project level and submitting testimony and comments in support of some of these things?
Yes, that is correct, Vice Chair. That is agenda item number 8. So great. I just want to thank you, Deputy Sullivan and Chris Clark, for this excellent presentation. It was a great discussion by all commissioners. I think there's more follow-up that we'll do, but thank you again. So I just want to move on to our agenda. We have about 4 more items and it is now 10:30. I think because we started a bit late, I'm going to try and push us to 11:15. I do hope commissioners, I guess a general question, does anyone have a hard stop at 11 o'clock? Okay, great. So we'll just keep moving on and I'll be cognizant of the time. All right. So we are going to move on to agenda item number
I'm
7.
sorry, Melanie, I think you have to ask
Yes.
if there are any public comments.
Oh, thank you. Thank you,
Yeah,
Kiana.
no
I
problem.
apologize the time. Are there any public comments regarding the presentation by Deputy Director Ben Sullivan or Chris Clark from the Department of Transportation and Services? Great. I see none in the chat. Haley, is there
Chair,
anything online? Yes.
I can confirm there are no questions online at this time.
Great. Thank you so much, Haley. And thank you, Vice Chair Otsuka, for that reminder. All right, we're going to move on. Agenda item number 7, a discussion and action on the transfer of co-leadership of our in development, tourism, and climate change document. So in our last meeting, we did a partial co-leadership transfer to Vice Chair Otsuka. So that paper currently lives with Vice Chair Otsuka and Commissioner Aligato. With Commissioner Aligato terming out and today being her last meeting, I think some of our goals is to find another commissioner that would like to assume the second seat. And so since both Vice Chair Otsuka and Commissioner Aligato have access to this current draft paper, and Commissioner Olson, just to your question, given the Sunshine Law, only 2 commissioners can actively work on a draft paper. So they have full access. They're able to communicate to each other only then until they sort of have the draft ready and want to discuss it. Then we as a whole commission will review it online in a very fun and interactive way. But going back to the main topic, if Vice Chair Otsuka and Commissioner Aligato, if you would like to give sort of an update as to where the guidance paper is, what are the next steps, so that we as a commissioner can understand that work and understand who might want to be the next co-lead.
Okay, so I'll get started. I think since Commissioner Otsuka just kind of came on as point for this, we have draft. We had presented it a couple times to commission to get some updated information, and we are probably in the process right now of integrating all of those comments. We identified some content matter experts for external review, which we did send out. And we received comments back. I think I did want to note that HTA does have new leadership now under Aaron Salah, so we may want to reach back and offer that if he has any additional comments, we would be happy to take them. And so the process is basically from here, we want to integrate all those comments in, bring it to a new draft, and then we are in the process of identifying stakeholders for our stakeholder focus groups so that we can figure out who might be best across the board under many different sectors. This tourism guidance document, unlike other guidance documents, is pretty cross-cutting. In the past, for example, we focused on heat, and so we've had, or we've done building greenhouse gas emissions, and those are much more clear who the stakeholder entities are. For something like tourism, which is cross-cutting and touches upon things like emergency services, transportation, we are likely to have a larger stakeholder group, so that might take more time. And so, Kristen, what that looks like is we have employed a number of different approaches. Sometimes it's a survey, sometimes it's focus groups. It's just our way of getting feedback, and of course, we then report on that and bring that back to commission. And those are times when the broader public can, of course, provide feedback. So, Ken, I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Oh yeah, Dr. Olson, I'll just add that with the last document, Brad and I worked on. The way we conducted stakeholder engagement was via a survey. And then we offered to folks if they would like to meet one-on-one with us, they're welcome to. So I think we had Brad, 6, 7, or 8 folks respond to the survey, and then we had one one-on-one virtual meeting with someone who was interested in talking story with us. And then we worked together to incorporate the feedback into the most recent draft. And then we brought it to the rest of the commissioners for additional comments, revisions, and then we voted to approve it. So that's sort of how we went about the most recent draft and stakeholder engagement. The only other thing I'll add is I was hoping to add a few more things to the document before we take it out for additional stakeholder engagement. So I had someone reach out with regard to food and ag, and then also invasive species. So I was hoping to add a little bit more in that. And then I wanted to add a little bit more, I think I put this in the chat, a little bit more into the transportation section. I signed up to co-chair this, or yeah, co-lead this because I wanted to add things, but it's certainly not my area of expertise. So I'm happy for if someone else wants to take the lead. I just want to have access to documents that was easier than our very fun, arduous process of live editing. So if other folks are interested in taking the lead on this, I won't be mad. So that's all.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Aligato and Vice Chair Otsuka. So we do want to, are there any questions from, really this is kind of a discussion, commissioners, from Commissioner Olson or Commissioner Romine on kind of what Commissioner Aligato and Vice Chair Otsuka shared about where the paper lives.
And then just to get
No, I think
more clarity to process, sorry for you, Kirsten, is once we incorporate the external review processes, what happens is that pretty much monthly, 10 days to a week before the agenda has to be posted, we have to make a decision like, is it to a point where we want to bring this back for more feedback to commission? If it is at a point where we're like, okay, this is like a draft as opposed to we still haven't incorporated all the external reviewer comments. If it is a draft, Karan and staff, or it doesn't necessarily have to be Karan, but OCCSR staff will send the commissioners out the materials for the meeting, which is the agenda, any correspondence from the public, as well as the most updated drafts of any in progress guidance documents. And then you basically have a week to edit it. Is kind of how it's been. And so if you have a you have after that period of time, but that's when you get access to it. And so we'll bring it back. We have live editing sometimes if it's agendized. And then if you have further comments, you're more than welcome to add those further comments and edits. Karan will then send it back out. So the main idea is that we cannot be per sunshine law unless we are and this has to do with the size of our commission. If we were a larger commission, the number of commissioners who could work on a document might be larger, but it's 2 at a time. So Karan really and OCCSR are really our vehicle for moving documents in a sunshine compliant way.
Thank you, Rosie. That was excellent update. As you know, Kiana and I are still understanding the background process.
Looking at the tasks ahead still, what would, maybe for Kiana, what would be your best guess as to when we might be able to wrap this document up? I guess we've had about 4 commission meetings before the end of the year. Do you think that's feasible by the end of the year, or just need to get through some of these steps to have a better sense of that?
Oh, that's a great question. I imagine we'd be able to wrap it up by the end of the year. I think it depends on what the co-chairs of the guidance document decide on their stakeholder engagement process. I think a survey is much quicker, and offer to meet one-on-one is quicker than trying to plan like a proper like public meeting. You know, I think it depends on the strategy we end up choosing for engagement.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a functional question. Maybe the office can help address. If we're unable to identify a second co-lead I'm assuming the paper will just currently live with Commissioner Osuka. Is that allowed?
Yeah, there's nothing that prescribes even the process that the commission has developed over the past many years in terms of teaming up to try to facilitate and advance any particular topic.
I mean, I just,
Dr. Olson-
I'm,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say I'm happy to step up on this one, but maybe not lead the first one, so I can learn the process here. And Kiana, so if you want to work together on this in the coming months, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you,
Is
Commissioner
anyone
Olson.
else interested in co-leading? I'm a little tapped capacity wise this next 6 months or so. So that's the only reason I ask. I did want to have a chance to add a couple things in there. But if others are interested in leading, I might hand this to somebody in the next month or two after adding stuff in. So I'll just premise that and see if folks are interested or have a couple months to think about if they're interested in taking this on. But I can let you know, Melanie, if I need someone to take it on, or if and when I'm ready for someone to take it from me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you know, what we can do is, because I know this sort of paper is kind of in evolution, right? We are in a transition. Commissioner Olson, if you're okay, and thank you again for volunteering and using this as an opportunity to kind of learn the ropes of the, development of a guidance document and how we work within Sunshine Law. I believe Vice Chair Osuka is comfortable co-leading for a moment. Kiana, let us know how that works. We can continue to sort of have it on the agenda and talk about it. But perhaps this would be a good way just for Commissioner Olson to sort of see what the paper looks like, understand the process, keep it on the agenda for next month, and we can kind of bring it up again. Because I think just from my observation, aside from the additional probably content you would like to add, the next big step is deciding how we as a commission initiate the stakeholder engagement process. So.
And Rosie, I think you have some notes in your folder, right, on suggestions for how to go about stakeholder engagement. I think so. We can have a look, Kirsten, and see if that's what we want to pursue.
Yeah, we started when Dr. Keener was still on the commission. We've actually identified, like, just brainstorming some people who we thought would be good for the stakeholder group. We had identified, like, general areas and started like naming folks who we'd like to engage with. Yeah.
Great. So I think just for documentation purposes, the current seat that is with Commissioner Allegado will be transferred to Commissioner Olson. And Vice Chair Osuka and Commissioner Olson will have access and will be developing the next phase of our tourism and climate change guidance document. And then we will sort of continue to have this on the agenda to talk about the evolution of it and if any co-leadership transfer needs to occur. Before we move on to the next agenda item, I'd like to see if there are any comments from the public regarding this topic. I see none appearing in the chat or any hands raised. Is there anything on Facebook Live, Haley?
There's none.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, so I think we're good with this agenda item. We are going to move on to agenda item number 8. And I had brought this up the last commission meeting, mainly because we are kind of in evolution, right? Commissioners are transitioning, new commissioners are coming in. And I wanted us to have an opportunity to really just have some ongoing discussion. I envision in perhaps the next 2-3 meetings to really kind of talk about the commission's priorities and sort of our work plan, what we'd like to focus on for the next year. Historically, let me just take a step back. Our charge, right, as a commission, it is really to provide the latest science and information as it relates to climate change effects to the city, provide advice to the mayor, the executive departments of the city. Historically, we have done that really through the development of these guidance documents, and we have a handful of very excellent documents that have been useful, have been, I believe, used by OCCSR and other offices. But just sort of given, kind of the nature of, I think, who we as individual commissioners are and how we understand perhaps that maybe some other methods might be useful, I wanted to just to have a discussion with you commissioners about your thoughts of other ways in which we could potentially convey some of this information to the city executive offices and departments. So I have some thoughts, but I'm curious, and I'll share my thoughts. So we have talked a little bit, Vice Chair and I have talked a little bit about how could we as a commission perhaps provide more testimony, whether it is in support or as a comment to some active legislation that is moving forward at the state and or council level. We understand that, given sunshine law, it sometimes makes it challenging for us to be as nimble as required, particularly during state legislation time. But I think it's an opportunity at least to show some support. So that was sort of one opportunity that I thought we could talk about. The other, which was formed through an HRS, and I believe other commissions and boards have done this, is establishing a permitted interaction group. They call it a PIG. And really, it's a group that is obviously one, it becomes an agendized topic, but it has a specific focus that comes out of a group, an organization like ourselves, the commission, to study and focus on something or to sort of act on behalf of the board. The focus needs to be very specific because if it goes outside of that realm, it potentially becomes, subject to sunshine, what have you. So in our case, it could be, one or two commissioners, very similar to the style that we have for the in-document development, but focus on particular items. And then other ideas I had was, are there just maybe more short memos or briefs or presentations that we could do to the city and executive boards? So I think this also speaks to, I would love to start developing kind of just a list of potential invited speakers and related topics, so we could have more broader kind of outreach and engagement. I think that, at the very core, the purpose of our commission is to convene discussion, and so at least provides an opportunity for the public to hear more about potentially new ideas that are going on and sort of how that could be applied and developed for our city. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to open up to the group. I'm just really kind of curious to hear your thoughts.
I'll chime
Before
in.
we, oh, sorry, go ahead, Brad.
Kiana, I'll go to you first, please.
Just really quick, Melanie and Rosie, since you folks have been on the commission the longest, I had a conversation with Dr. Kaufman about the emissions reduction plan because she's an author and a previous commissioner about like what folks were doing before with regard to taking action. And she mentioned that the commission was submitting testimony, and I wanted to know the structure in which you folks did that to sort of inform how we might be able to do that and in the most nimble way possible that also follows sunshine law. That's
I
all.
would maybe defer to Matt to kind of like provide some insight as to the timing of how we have to agendize things. And then I can
Yes.
provide about how we got together and wrote the testimony.
Yes, happy to do so. Any of the past historical testimonies on city council bills, I don't believe there's any history of the commission submitting testimony on state legislation. But all of those past city council testimonies were done through the meeting process, similarly where drafts were agendized, shared out, and then finalized. And then the facilitation and the logistics was between CCSR and the chair at the time for signatures and getting it into the city system. And we certainly are not the advisor to the commission on ensuring compliance with sunshine. There is a deputy corporation counsel, Courtney Sue Acco, who I know the chair and the vice chair are connected with. And in short, to use some of their language, the purpose of Sunshine is not nimbleness. It's about open, public, transparent processes and ensuring that everything is done above board and everyone knows what boards and commissions and elected officials are doing. That doesn't mean there aren't other means to become to speed up processes, but I do also want to obviously acknowledge that it's our staff that then needs to facilitate any of the logistics for meeting prep, ensuring compliance with Sunshine, posting agenda, sharing out documents, etc. So we would certainly want to be part of any of that hoped for processes moving forward.
Okay, so then what Matt said is totally right. Like, I think the biggest factor for us is being able to time it. Like, if we're aware of when something is coming up, if it's agendized early on, the place where we would want to put testimony in, that gives us time to say, okay, we're gonna agendize it. Then generally speaking, what is most useful is if one of the commissioners volunteers to write that draft of testimony, and then we bring it as, so it's not only agendized as, okay, we're going to, well, what happens is we identify it as an issue that is germane and relevant for the commission to write testimony for. One of the commissioners may volunteer to write a draft for it. It's agendized, so then we bring it to that meeting, and we work on it in public right there, and then we finalize it and then send it around. The OCCSR sends it around for signatures or what have you, and then it gets submitted. Generally speaking, the chair is the one who submits the testimony, not OCCSR. Yeah, I can answer any additional questions about that.
Question about
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
Thank you. So the first time, say, a bill is heard, this could be at the city or state, we'd want to have some testimony prepared for that. What would be the process then? Say we get that done, get it in through all the processes we have to go through. What's the following process then the next time the bill gets heard? If we want to adapt that written testimony some, do we have to go through a whole public process again to maybe change just a few sentences or, recognizing a new draft of the bill or something like that in a follow-on hearing? How does that work?
I would think we would have to agendize it, bring it back to the commission, just so that everything is honestly transparent, right? Because we are a public board, it would have to be subject to public input. So what Rosie said is correct. The challenge is timing is everything, right? Right now, in the past, we've been meeting once a month. Just particularly, at the state level, things just move a bit faster, right? And there's a particular time in which LEDGE is active. And I think additional tasks would probably be asked upon us as commissioners, if, for example, it is something that we want to track more closely, we want to be involved, at least to support policy or legislation out there. I think having some focus on particular bill topics that we'd like to focus on and then actually tracking them is probably an agenda topic that we, and at least in my opinion and experience, we would have on every single meeting, right? To know like where the bill is moving. And then maybe to your point, Brad, we as a group could decide what is a strategic time to provide testimony, right? Whether in for, against, or comment, to perhaps remove some of those additional steps. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. I am supportive of us getting more involved in city and state legislation and testimony.
Okay.
I can offer to help, particularly on the state side. I'm connected with the State Climate Commission as well, work closely with Leah Laramie, so I could help track as we get closer to that season, bills that may be of interest to this group as well.
Great, that's excellent, Brad. I'll just share that I also sit on our AIA's Hawaii State Council. So we track bills from a building environment standpoint that crosses a multitude of things. So potentially, some joint efforts to cloud source this or workshop all of this information. That's
Great.
excellent. Vice Chair Otsuka.
I have a couple of questions and ideas. So, and maybe we can ask this question to Courtney, Melanie. So what, can we submit the same testimony if the bill doesn't change, even though it's a different committee hearing, for example? I think maybe good question for Courtney. And then my last two questions, one, maybe a way around this timing issue, and maybe again, question for Courtney is, how the state ledge, and I'm not as familiar with like city hearings, but the state ledge publishes their long list of bills that have been introduced. Maybe that's the point we write testimony and try to have a meeting to review the testimony before the bills are even introduced. That might be a way to get around sort of the initial list. And then my third comment and or question was maybe, and or like with the introducing of bills, maybe the point at which we can submit testimony is right before we're in this weird period where the ledge is like, great, we like this bill, but the governor hasn't signed the bill. So maybe our testimony goes to the governor to say, hey, Governor, Climate Commission supports or doesn't support this bill that you are either going to sign or not sign into law. So those some ideas of trying to but trying to work with the really rapid movement of state ledge session. So maybe you can follow up with Courtney and or folks have thoughts or comments on those. I'd be keen to hear it.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea to follow up with Courtney just on kind of essentially reuse, right, of a testimony letter. So if you want to start drafting that email to Courtney, that would be good, since we already have a dialogue with her on this item. Commissioner Alicado.
So I just want to encourage you. Courtney used to come to every single meeting that we had, but we kind of got used to it and weren't making mistakes so much, so she didn't have to come. But I want to put as an option that you can invite her to come back, and
Okay.
you can agendize, like, having her give a short retraining session on sunshine laws. That might be good once maybe the new commissioner is onboarded as part of that. And as part of that process, you can then ask her these questions that to get clarification on. So that's one suggestion I have. The other suggestion I have is that in my experience, you can take slightly different approaches to city council measures versus state legislatures. Like the city council ones, I feel like they get calendarized. We have more lead time. Sometimes with the state, the legislature, there's the lead time is a little bit different. So just consider if you want to make a process for like city council measures versus state kind of things. And always, the last thing I was going to say is always remember that it is also important that you can submit individual testimony. And that is something that in the past our commissioners have done, is that we've also, if there isn't enough time, we've submitted individual testimony that was very similar and probably would have been something that the commission would have said, but we just perhaps didn't have enough time to agendize it, bring it to the meeting, and do it through sunshine.
Those are great points. Thank you, Rosie. Matt?
Just to reemphasize, though, I know Commissioner Alicado meant this. In the submitting of the individual testimony, it's in the individual capacity, not as a member of the commission.
Yes, thank you. I think this is all really, really great. I think, yeah, developing a policy and whatnot is important. So what should we do? We'll just keep notes of these things, right? And we'll bring this up at the next meeting and talk about it a little bit more when the new commissioner comes on board. Are there any other ways or thoughts that other commissioners might have in which we could, share information to the city? Go ahead, Brad.
Melanie, I think you mentioned maybe doing shorter memos. I think that's an interesting idea, especially to be responsive to more current issues that pop up, impacts that may occur to the city that we want to kind of respond to. These guidance documents can take a year to get through. They've been wonderful. It's worth the effort, but I think the idea of we should keep that in mind, a shorter format that could be a little more responsive on maybe narrower issues and more kind of immediate concerns.
Yeah.
So thanks for suggesting that. Yeah.
Agree. Okay. I think these are great items. I think we can continue talking more about this. Kiana, you have one last thing, and maybe we'll move to the next item.
Yeah.
But I like this discussion. And we'll have them in the meeting minutes, and I will continue to have this on the agenda, and we can kind of build upon this. But one thing I would like to maybe ask the commissioners is, in the past when we've been talking about the guidance documents, and I think this relates to the memo discussion, areas that we want to investigate. And I know we each have like subject matter, right, that is pertinent to the work that we do. I'd like to just kind of broadly understand what that might be. I have been, just so you guys know, looking back at all of our guidance documents and sort of seeing what kind of recommendations that have come through it. I've started sort of like a large Google matrix. I'd like to maybe share that out at one of the meetings as a screen share, just so we can sort of see that. But there are a lot of great topics that have emerged that maybe it's worth revisiting. So, but Kiana, go ahead.
Yeah, just one last thing. I know Haley from the CCSR staff was sending us sort of hearing notices for climate change related items. So Matt, I know you folks are sort of at capacity, but I think that would maybe help us, Melanie, the commission, kind of decide what we want to write testimony on potentially, if the timing works out. So if that's possible for us to continue getting those emails, I think that would be really helpful.
Yes, I think we can institute a practice. Again, at the city council level, if something is a new bill, it certainly has a much longer runway than the rush that is the 5-month state legislative process.
Thank you, Matt, for offering that needed support. Are there any comments from the public regarding this agenda topic? Haley, is there anything online?
There's none.
Okay, great. Perfect. I'm going to move on to the next agenda topic, if that's okay with the commissioners. All right, great. So we're on agenda number 9. We have 5 more items to get through, but they're rather brief. The next one is to really kind of talk about our next series of meetings. So I think as of now, we don't have a next meeting on the books, but we have in the past been meeting at like a monthly cadence, generally around the 3rd or 4th Friday, and generally between the 9 to 11 sort of hour. I would like to get our meetings booked out for the next 2 quarters, just so we have it as a general placeholder. But most immediately, if it's possible, I would love us to kind of try and schedule our next meeting, primarily because we were hoping to have a few presentations from some individuals. And then I also do want to try and engage Dr. Fox as soon as possible when she gets confirmed as well. So I believe some dates that we are looking at in September, the 3rd and 4th would be the 20th and the 27th. Yep. I don't know what that looks like for people's calendars.
Okay, and I want to clarify, we were looking at Friday, September 20th from 9 to 11. I'm gonna put this in the chat. And then Friday, September 27th in the afternoon from 1 to 3.
It was Friday the afternoon. Are you unavailable on
the second one? Yeah.
I see. Okay.
27 from 1 to 3 p.m.
Is there a preference by Commissioner Romine or Commissioner Olson on availability? Are you both generally flexible?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm available on the 20th, not on the 27th.
Okay. And how about you, Commissioner Olson? Are you available on the 20th?
Either day.
Okay, okay. I prefer the morning, so I think let's book the September 20th as our next commission meeting from 9 to 11. And I guess I just want to ask, Kiana, your schedule, so is it every fourth Friday where you're unavailable in the morning?
I think it's the third Friday generally. I can send you the dates. It just overlaps with the state TOD council that I'd like to go to.
Okay.
But they have their schedule through 2025, so I can send you. Is it helpful if I send you the dates for those? They're not
Yes.
always the third Friday. There's sometimes the fourth.
Okay, because where I'm going is if Corinne is available, I would like her to send out a meeting poll so we could kind of just schedule out the next meeting so it's on everyone's calendar. Whether or not we decide to execute it, we just kind of have that as a placeholder. So yeah, so but just for everyone's knowledge, we'll be looking at the third and fourth Friday of each month from 9 to 11.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to move on to our next agenda item, which is comments and correspondence, and communication from the public. So we didn't receive none, which is great. So we're going to move on to our next agenda item, public input for matters that are not on the agenda. Is there anything from the public? Haley, anything online?
Nothing online.
Okay, great. Thank you, Haley. Well, this brings us to our second to the last. It's just a general announcement. So since this is, I'm going to call you Chair Aligato because you have been our chair for such a long time. Last meeting, I just want to thank you for all your years of just dedication and just excellent work to the commission. It has been such a privilege to be part of the commission while you have been leading it. And I know there are huge shoes to fill, and your resources have been so helpful for us and just in this transition period. So I just want to thank you, particularly for your work in equity and kind of bringing that lens to the commission. I have started to relook the equity commitment that we all made, and I still keep in the back of my mind that we want to be more public physically, have these physical meetings. So I would love us to continue doing that, but I just want to thank you again for your work and your continued sort of work in making Hawaii and Honolulu just a better place. So thank you. Thank you. Other commissioners, are there any other announcements, things you'd like to share? Go ahead, Brad.
Just want to echo those thanks to Commissioner Aligato. It has been a pleasure and honor working with you through this commission. I'm very happy that we have an opportunity to continue to work together through the university, but it's been really fun and yeah, again, an honor in this format. So thanks for all your years of service to this commission and to our community. I did want to make one brief announcement. It's something I could follow up on if folks wanted more information. Hopefully news has gotten around about this, but Hawaii, through our Sea Grant program and through a range of partners, we received $68.5 million through the NOAA Climate Resilience Regional Challenge. So again, this is a big project. I'd be happy to brief out more on for later for time's sake, but we're going to be doing a range of projects with a number of different partners, including DLNR, HUA, the Nature Conservancy, State Office of Planning, Conservation International, Kubu Aina Corps, and a number of other local partners, not naming them all for time's sake. We're still kind of in the pre-award phase, hoping to kick this off in October. And we'll be doing a range of different resilience efforts, really focused on a Mauka to Makai approach. for improving climate resilience, and we're focused on a number of MOKU, one in each of the islands here in Hawaii. And on Oahu, it'll be Waianae. Those MOKU were picked for their high potential for promoting Native Hawaiian stewardship and practices, and areas that have lacked historic investment in climate resilience. So we're really excited about this award. Sea Grant is a lead, but we really look at this as an opportunity for the whole state and including Oahu. Happy to provide more details at a future meeting if desired on our work, especially for Oahu. We're still working out all those detailed work plans and again in the pre-award phase. I'll put a link to that project in the chat here, and folks can reach out to me if they have questions. That is all. Thank you.
Excellent. That's great, Brad. Commissioners, feel free to unmic if you need anything to share.
Oh, I have my monthly announcement about the state electric bike, electric moped rebate. So the moment you're eligible, if you participate in low income assistance program, if you don't own a vehicle or if you are currently enrolled in school, college, or university, that makes you eligible for up to $500 off or 20% of the total retail price of an electric bike or electric moped. So please take advantage of that if you're interested. And then my second announcement is the Hawaii Conference of Planning Officials is from September 11th to 13th. It's going to be on Hawaii Island this year in Kamuela, and there will be multiple climate change topics being presented. So if folks are interested, I'll pop the link for both into the chat.
Great. Well, if there are no more announcements, Commissioner Aliaga, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say, but okay. Great.
I
Well,
just say thank you again. I would like to say thank you. This was very much a new effort when I stepped onto this commission, and I guess what I would just like to express is just really deep appreciation for OCCSR. They do so much behind you all do so much behind the scenes. You're so proactive. I think I'm just very proud to have been part of this process and to really highlight and bring to the fore and hopefully empower our city agencies so that when and if climate disasters or other crises hit, that we have already thought about it and we are very prepared, and there will be hard decisions to make, but we've brought the best information that we can to those decision making and policy making processes for the best benefit of the people of the city and county of Honolulu.
Oh, thank you, Rosie. Excellent words. You will always be our chair. Again, so thank you, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner Aliaga and Director Gonzer, for all your work. I just want to say on behalf of the commissioners, it was such a pleasure to work with you guys. Wish you all your best on your next chapter. And please stay in touch. This concludes our agenda for today. It is now 11:17, and going to bid you all aloha. Thank you so much. See you next month.
Aloha.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rosie.